traders, and welcome to another video on sentiment. Except this time we're talking about social sentiment. And I've been talking about market sentiment throughout this entire channel, which is looking at position data and making trading decisions based off of what other people are doing. Social sentiment is not looking at what people are doing, but looking at what people are saying. So what we're going to be talking about today is how do we use all these different sources of social sentiment in trading altcoins and in trading Bitcoin. So the first thing that I want to talk about is why we can't always use market sentiment. Market sentiment is great, and I'm even going to say that market sentiment is better to look at than social sentiment. The issue about market sentiment is the amount of data that we have. Bitfinex's margin positions, which is where I've been getting my sentiment data, is only a small subsection of the overall crypto market. Now, I want to see, ideally a 100% representation of the overall crypto market, but I'm not going to get that. And that's why we want to look at social sentiment and looking at news, looking at mentions, and looking at positive or negative mentions on different social media sites and on the internet. This can actually give a really, really good look at the overall market that market sentiment can't always do because of its lack of amount of position data. So these are the 5 sources that I'm going to be using today for social sentiment, and I'm going to be posting these in the links below. And they're all free, no signups, no nothing. You just go on and you start reading the data. So there are 2 kinds of social sentiment that we're going to be looking at today. We have positive negative sentiment, where we have machine learning or artificial intelligence that's going to track keywords on social media and categorize all of them as a positive or as a negative statement. Then we have the simpler, just public interest, which is using bots to just track the amount of mentions that we get on social media sites, typically Reddit, Bitcoin Talk, and Twitter. And let's start off with just public interest and looking at how we can relate that to price change. So these are my 3 steps that I like to use when I'm looking at public interest of an altcoin or at Bitcoin. The first thing that I want to know is, what's the amount of market volatility? When we have very, very high volatility, we typically don't want to enter a trade. What I typically advocate for is we want to enter when we're in a period of low volatility. So we first want to determine what is the market volatility, and really what does that tell us about how people are feeling about the market right now, or looking at social sentiment itself. And then the second thing I like to do is just determine the current trend. So are we in an uptrend? And now are we in a retracement? Are we in a sustained uptrend that has not retraced? Are we in a consolidation period? Are we in a downtrend? Are we in a downtrend that turns into consolidation? And so on. And you may wonder, well, that's really generic. What time frame am I looking at for these 2 things here? You want to look at the time frame that's the same that you're looking at for sentiment. So if sentiment's posted every hour, you should be looking at an hourly chart. If sentiment's posted every day, you should be looking at a daily chart, and then looking at daily volatility, looking at daily trend, as opposed to hourly, unless you're looking at hourly change in public interest. Now for strategy, typically a massive spike in public interest during a sustained trend is going to lead to a retracement or a reversal. What I've found is that the best signals when I'm looking at social mentions or public interest is when you get just the same 3-step price pattern that's been happening for hundreds of years. You have an uptrend, and then you have just middling volatility, and then we get a surge in public interest and a surge in the price with very high volatility, price skyrocketing, and a lot of people are interested, and then you get that slow downtrend back down, and that's what Bitcoin's doing right now. But a lot of other coins are doing that same exact 3-step pattern on a 1-month time frame, or a 1-month window, as I should call it. And the other 3 points are important, but really the most important part, and if you just look at this, then that's probably fine as well, if you just focus on this one right here. These 3 can be a little bit more advanced, so let's just focus on this one here. And let's take a look at some trends and determine when is public interest very high, and what happened to price. The first thing that I see when we're looking at TRX, Tron, is we had an average amount of interest and the market was going down. So when the market's going down and interest isn't really spiking, in any way, I don't really expect the price to change. I don't really expect the price to begin a very strong uptrend. Why should the price begin a very strong uptrend if we're not getting a significant change in the feeling of the traders? And we still just see a failed uptrend here, where price just retraces upward but does not fully begin an uptrend. And then what we see is a stop loss hunt. Price goes just below its price here, hits many stop losses, and then we get that mini surge in public interest, where we go to what looks about 800 mentions in one day, right here. And we can see at this point, we're getting a lot more daily mentions than we've ever gotten before. And really, this is not a coincidence. This is not random. What we're seeing is a lot of people were talking about Tron when many positions had likely gotten liquidated if you had longed. Maybe the shorts were ecstatic and many shorts were profitable. So the profit of the shorts is like here. The out of the money for the longs is like, here. Many longs are losing money. And it's at this point that many of those longs might think about shorting. Many of those longs are likely selling right now, and so on. When we get that spike in public interest with a lot of people talking about it. And then price went up, as you can see. And then price continued to go up until we get that pattern that I talked about before, where we get that high volatility rise with a large increase in public interest. And this is just not healthy for a trend. And then we just see that rapid rise and rapid fall. And public interest spikes from about 1,300, which is in purple, actually about 1,200 to about 2,400. So public interest just about spiked in one day. That is a significant pattern. That typically does not happen on coins that are in the top 25 market cap by cryptocurrency. So this was a sign that many buyers have likely already bought, and that the market probably is going to have a harder time finding more buyers to continue to push the price higher. So price went down. Let's take a look at BNB BTC. So what we see here is we had an uptrend that began. Average public interest, average social volume, not much I'm expecting here, nothing crazy. Price continues to move up, just slowly moving up. And then we get this. We get a surge in public interest right here as price falls down to that level. What does that mean? A lot of people are maybe interested in buying Binance Coin. They may see this as a cheaper price to buy at. Potentially this public interest spike could also actually mean that a lot of people were buying here as well. It could mean that a lot of people were buying here or a lot of people were buying here during that window, because this is not a very detailed graph. This is averaging every day. But basic sense, there's a large amount of people talking about Binance Coin after the price has gone up and after we have a period of low volatility. So what we see here is price crashed. What could have occurred here is many buyers had bought and put their stop losses lower. And with a lot of buyers here, those position buyers are turning into potential sellers. So as price began to touch their stop losses, as price began to hit a few of them, they panicked and we get that massive sell-off there. And then we're just seeing BNB going lower right here. Let's look at Stratus. So this one, just relatively simple, just price slowly going up, not much interest, meaning it's probably just going to keep going up. And we get that surge in volatility, and with the surge in volatility, what do we get? We get a surge in the social volume. We go from about, not many people talking about it to about over 200 people talking about it, or 200 posts mentioning it in one day. That's not a lot, I know, but the percent change is like I'd say 10 times. So we have 10 times as many people talking about it after it surges in price or as it surges in price. This is telling me that we have a lot of buyers coming in who have already bought. Not a good sign. And then price just went down. And then we see Litecoin here, and this is one that I wanted to highlight. We have downtrend with not much change in public interest. And then we go just below this low here, as you can see. Litecoin traded to the US dollar. We go just below this low, and a lot of times when you go just below a low, you're hitting stop losses, you're convincing the retail market that to short. You're just convincing the retail market that the market's just going to keep going lower. It's broken a low. What happened? Social volume in that one day where price moved just below that low surged 95% relative to the last period. So social volume about doubled. A lot of people are talking about Litecoin here, likely trashing Litecoin and saying pretty bad things about it. This would have been a really good buying opportunity. if you had social sentiment on your mind. And price went up. So that's really what we're looking at when we are looking at social volume, when we're looking at total mentions on Reddit and on Twitter and so on. Just a few quick sources you can use to get that kind of data. The one I was showing is called Solume.io. You just go here, and you can just click on any coin that you would like. You can also look at enroid.com/sentiment. And this is going to give you total mentions in the 24-hour, 7-day, and the 30-day. And then what we also are going to be looking at is Coin Gossip. This is looking at just Reddit and how much gossip have we had here. We've gotten a 29% gossip change and so on Reddit. And if you ever want to see a graph of any of these coins, so you would go to details. I would type in the coin, and then you would see it here. We would see the amount of mentions or the amount of social volume that we're getting here, as you can see. Although I would be careful here, I just noticed the y-axis has a very, very small mentions, so maybe you don't want to look at that. Very important to pay attention to how big the sample size is, because of course the bigger the sample size, the better representation of that coin. The smaller the sample size like this, this data is basically irrelevant. But that's just for Binance Coin on this site here. When we're looking at something like Bitcoin, it's going to have a lot more mentions. That's going to give us more data. So when we look at Bitcoin here, this is a little bit more of better data where we can see surges in mentions. So those three sites are just ways that you can look at public interest. Now let's go a little bit more complex and begin to talk about positive and negative social sentiment. So again, this is AI that's scrolling through the web and looking for positive and negative mentions of cryptocurrency. The process of how I trade this is similar to how I look at social volume. The only difference is down here in how I actually execute my trade. So I've talked about it a lot of times with market sentiment, but extremely positive sentiment in an uptrend is typically going to be bearish. That represents a lot of people who have already bought into the coin, and we don't have a lot of buyers, so price is going to have a harder time going higher. Opposite for a downtrend. Price goes down, we get very negative sentiment. Here we're talking about social sentiment. That's typically going to be bullish with a retracement or with a full reversal. Because many people have already sold. Many people have already shorted. We're not going to see a lot more shorting or selling occur because we don't have enough potential sellers to continue to sell at lower prices. That's just simple sentiment 101. And then we get a little bit more complex here. Extremely positive sentiment can reverse a downtrend. I talked a little bit about this with market sentiment, but this is a little bit more true with news sentiment, I would say, than with market sentiment. With social sentiment it is. So if we see a very strong downtrend and then a period of low volatility, during that period, if we see a large amount of positive sentiment coming in, that can actually begin an uptrend. And the reason that is because I wondered when I looked at this data and I kept screening through all these different data sources and looking at market reactions on dozens of different coins and such, it's that the beginning of a period of rapid buying can lead to a sustained period of buying, which is an uptrend. So if we have a strong downtrend and then we see very positive sentiment, that can tell us that traders are stopping or not selling anymore and are beginning to buy. And traders who have sold during that downtrend are also beginning to buy. And it's that beginning of buying that's the beginning of the uptrend that makes it go higher. And when we see extremely negative sentiment in an uptrend, what that means is price went up, and then a lot of those buyers get very, very scared and angsty. And what happens? They all sell very quickly. And that's why that negative sentiment led to that downtrend and a reversal of the uptrend. So both can be true. But really the main factor here, not to confuse anyone, is the most important part is look at extremes only. We do not care that much about sentiment that's in that normal distribution. What we care about is when sentiment's very, very low or when sentiment's very, very high. Because if you see a very strong uptrend and then you see just ballooning high sentiment, that's not a great sign. Or if you even see very, very low sentiment and price just kind of goes sideways after it goes very quickly upward, that's also a decently bearish sign as well. So let's go into a few of the factors that I like to look at. And the first one that I want to show is actually my favorite sentiment tool, which is Pip Stir. So this is a site that I found from just digging around on the internet. I'm going to link it below. And this is how you can, this is how it gets its data from Twitter, as you can see, and it uses artificial intelligence. All right, so now let's zoom in and let's take a look at the way that it has calculated negative and positive sentiment over time and how that led to certain price changes. So the first thing that I see here, just angle that right, is we had a period of positive sentiment there. Price went down. People were happy about it, about Bitcoin, and price went down. Then we saw negative sentiment beginning to enter the market as price went down, as traders may have thought, hey, I was wrong, I should probably short, I should probably sell. What do we get? A stop loss hunt here. I mean, that's actually just a downtrend. We get a period where price goes up, and then we get a stop loss on here during negative sentiment, and price begins an uptrend. Then what happens? Well, price goes up. So these buyers who turn into sellers are now, maybe I should buy again. Some positive sentiment. People are talking about good things about Bitcoin on Twitter. Overall, it's a positive mood. So price goes down into a stop loss hunt here. Price goes from a recent high of about 65.14, 65.40, let's call it, because that's what I'm reading here. Price goes down to a low from 65.40 to about 6,300. And that's during this period of positive sentiment. Price crashes down here. Hits some stop losses as well because it goes right below that low. Then we see some negative sentiment beginning to come into the market, and that propels the market to go higher. And then we see this prolonged period of positive sentiment where price is just slowly increasing, and then we get that rapid drop off here. And what we can actually begin to see here is that sentiment was actually beginning to turn negative. And I want to reference this point here. Extremely negative sentiment can reverse an uptrend. And that is what we saw here. We saw a massive drop off in sentiment at the end of this uptrend, and then sentiment got very negative and price went down. Then what we see is price crashes here, comes into a period of low volatility, and then we see sentiment getting very, very negative here. So what happened? Well, price went down a little bit further in what could be called a stop loss hunt, and then price really went a lot higher. But this would have been a not terrible spot to buy, as you can see, especially after that drop, because we're in a period of very negative sentiment and in a period of a downtrend. And then what we see here is, again, positive sentiment entering the market. So these traders who are like, oh, I want to sell, which means that we should probably want to buy, they all wanted to buy here. As you can see, when price went from 62 to about 65. A lot of positive sentiment entering the market, so price went down from about 65 to about 62.50. Then we had negative sentiment entering the market, so price went up. We have positive sentiment entering the market, so price went down. People were happy about Bitcoin here. Period of low volatility, price goes down. Here we see a period of negative sentiment after that downtrend right there. And then price goes from 64.87 to a high of about 6,600s. But we get some positive sentiment, so price goes down once again because the buyers had caught on. Negative sentiment, price goes up. You know, you get the story until we get to the best part of the graph here. Positive sentiment, price is chilling here, the 6,600s. Price crashes down to 6,200. Very negative sentiment here. I think probably the most negative sentiment we've seen on this entire chart. And this would have been a beautiful spot to buy. Low volatility, a lot of people hating on Bitcoin right here. Just a great time to buy. So price pops up from 62 all the way up to, you know, a high of it within the 7,000s as sentiment's negative here. And then we get this period of positive sentiment. And that did not lead to a price jump at all. You can see low volatility, period of positive sentiment here. Price went from 65.60 to a current about 64. So about $100 drop. And now we're beginning to see a little bit more negative sentiment come in. What I want to see, you know, if I want to be bullish on Bitcoin, is I need to see more negative sentiment. I need to see more traders acting like this. so that we can get that. And I want to see more traders acting like this so we can get this. I want to see more traders who are panicking after a downtrend and getting very negative so that I know that price is going to go up. Here again, I want to see that negative sentiment coming to the market so that I can know that price is going to go up. So I really want to see more negative sentiment coming into the market and people talking, and on social media about terrible things about Bitcoin, because that's when I know, counter trading those guys, that price just may be able to go up. All right, so another one that we are going to look at for plus minus, so positive, negative sentiment, is the equity index with Bitcoin futures. So this is a little bit more complex in its calculation. You can just read over this if you want to pause the video. So it's looking at Twitter and it's looking at StockTwits messages. And let's go take a look at the data. So with the 1 week, let's take a look at the 1 month. Let's take a look at October 18th Central Time. We have a large amount of positive sentiment, as indicated here. We have a S score of 3.8. And we also have a large amount of social volume. Because what we want to be careful with when we look at this chart is this does look very positive. It looks like a large amount of positive sentiment is coming in. People are wanting to buy. But it's not backed up by many tweets. You can see the tweet volume here is only 176. Here it's much more significant, of about 508. So what happened on October 18th? And what did that lead to? So October 18th, let's go to the 1 hour chart. That was here. We have a large amount of positive sentiment coming to the market. What happened? Price went down to a low, went about 4% down to the recent low. So price began the 18th here. This is when a lot of people were thinking about, hey, maybe I should buy Bitcoin. Maybe I should buy here to, position myself for the next price pop up, because they thought that was going to happen again. And price did this because so many of them on Twitter and StockTwits had believed that, and price went down. So that's just a good way to look at counter trading. And again, if you're ever confused by my point here of extremely positive or extremely negative, what does that mean? We always want to look at the present trend. That's the second most important point. The first most important, of course, is how extreme is that sentiment relative to the past values. Second most is what has price recently done. What did price recently do here? Downtrend. I'm talking about to October 18th. I think this is very clearly a downtrend. We go from, the high is not really fair to measure from. I'll measure from here. We're down 9%. I think that's pretty clear downtrend. And then we get a period of low volatility here. And when we get this period of low volatility, we see the market kind of just equalizing a little bit more. And then we get a spike in positive sentiment. And that's not great for the market, especially after this price drop. Because I know they can get a little bit complicated when looking at these. So hopefully to make that less complicated, let's take a look at some other readings as well. We can take a look at the 1 week. So with the 1 week, we see a large amount of action occurring with tweet volume here, as you can see. And that is 5:10 p.m. Central Time. So that would be 17 o'clock Central Time. However, this is not a massive amount of sentiment, really, but we can still look at it. So that's 17 o'clock on the 23rd. So that's right on the 23rd. Yep, 17 o'clock on the 23rd. So that would be here. You can see we have a large amount of positive sentiment coming in, and we have this downtrend from downtrend from here down to here, and then price began to go up from here to here, and that may have been due to positive sentiment. But again, I would be very careful with reading the 1 day and the 1 week social sentiment trends, because I like to see more data. I like to see more averaging of data, because this is just not going to be able to tell you much. Yeah, 354 S volume is nice, but it's really the 1 month that I like to look at a lot more with the S volume. And the 6 month is great too. This can tell us some really good times of negative and positive sentiment, such as we can even look at September 3rd. So what was going on September 3rd, and why was sentiment so negative? Well, this one was interesting. September 3rd's here. So what that means is the data for September 3rd is what you're reading. So it's September 4th that was the outcome of that data. Price went up a little bit after all of that negative sentiment then just crashed. Why? Well, the very, very, very negative sentiment, extremely negative sentiment here, reversed the uptrend to go down. And then what we see, again, is very positive sentiment on August 14th, which was the beginning of the uptrend right here. And again, this is so much more clear. Sustained downtrend, very positive sentiment, price goes up. Sustained uptrend, very negative sentiment, price goes down. And then if we look here, June 1st, very positive sentiment. June 1st, and this one's clear as well. So June 1st, that means that price was about here. We have a lot of traders who are likely buying in this price window. What happens? Price went down because we have a sustained uptrend that goes up. We get positive sentiment at that point in time, so price goes down. Any other extremes that we see? Yeah. We see the October 18th we just talked about, though. October 11th, I think we just talked about that one as well. Another one that's kind of interesting, I think, is May 16th, 2018. So May 16th, 2018 was, okay, well, this one didn't really have much of an effect, I would say. It just led to a quick bullish bounce. Very negative sentiment in a downtrend typically is going to lead to more of a bounce. But what we see here is that price just kind of bounced up a few percent there because so many people had likely already sold. That's when we got that little bit more of a retracement there. Any others that I have not talked about yet? August 14th, I think we talked about. And of course, looking at that would be important as well. When we look at the 1 year, we can even see, I think this one was interesting. February 19th, yeah, this one was. February 19th, we have a large amount of positive sentiment. A score of, it's like I'm scoring it, the highest score ever. An S score of 4. So February 19th, the market is very, very bullish. And that was here. Remember, the data is collected on February 19th, so the price change would be February 20th. Price went down here 17% then. The more long-term downtrend, price really went down. So when the traders were very, very bullish here, that was at that point in time. So not surprising. Okay, so that's really it for the equity index and looking at social sentiment. What we can also look at for the final read is Enroid. So let's take a look at Bitcoin and let's look at its social sentiment index. Personally, I do like Pip Stir and I do like the S score from social market analytics, but Enroid can be nice to look at as well sometimes. This is going to give you some sentiment scores throughout time as well, and monthly. What I also like to look at is not just Bitcoin on this, but we can look at a coin such as, EOS. And look at the positive and negative impact of EOS. And we can see very negative sentiment that had occurred October 8th. So if we look at EOS BTC, October 8th, that was here, just about at the top of this uptrend. So we have a sustained uptrend. And at the top of this uptrend, we get a large amount of negative sentiment, extreme amount of negative sentiment, which causes price to go down. If that sentiment score had occurred when price had already gone down, then that would be showing us the opposite, that price would be likely to go up because so many traders have likely already sold. And we see another one. We see it September 6th, just to look at one where we had very positive sentiment, which was here, which reversed this sustained downtrend there to go up. And then what do we also see? We see September 6th we looked at. The absolute highest was August 22nd. We had a large amount of positive for EOS, and that was really here. After this just very long downtrend, and price goes up. And then another one that we see was October 17th, October 18th. October 17th to October 18th, but really not much happened here besides price went up, as you can see there. So again, another thing to take into account is that these points here are going to vary for each site. For Enroid, you may notice that these 2 points hold true quite often. But when we look at something like Pip Stir, you may have noticed that positive sentiment 90% of the time is leading to a downtrend. Negative sentiment, like 90% of the time, is leading to an uptrend, as you can see here. Very, very clear data. Positive, price goes down. Negative, price goes up. So you're going to want to look at each of these sites in a different way. So with Pip Stir, I'd recommend looking at these two. With Enroid, I'd recommend looking at these two. When looking at the equity index, I would recommend looking at both. So that would be my final take on reading these sentiment data interfaces. And finally, just the question I get a lot of the times with even market sentiment. On social sentiment, how do I trade this? Well, I would not recommend short-term scalping. Just not a good idea with sentiment. I think that you should be waiting a amount of time for sentiment to collect and to get a large amount of data. That's going to probably be medium or long-term trading. What's medium-term trading to me? Trading about once to twice a week, unless you're trading altcoins. And altcoins are going to be a lot more often than Bitcoin, and that's at least my experience with trading. With trading altcoins, you may want to trade a little bit shorter time frame to not have as much exposure to an altcoin. It also may be best to wait for the market to settle before you enter. When the market's moving on low volatility, that's typically when a large price spike or price drop is about to occur after a period of sustained low volatility. And we want to position ourselves before that big price move happens and not try to trade during it. So that's why I like to advocate for trading during periods of low volatility. Also, always use limit orders. There's no reason why we should be executing a social sentiment trade, whether it's counter the market or with the market. Really no reason we should ever be market buying or market taking profit. If you're trading medium term, there's plenty of opportunity for you to use a limit order to try to buy or sell in. So stay patient. Except for stop losses, of course. When you're using a stop loss, you want to get out of the market quickly. 1-to-1 or higher risk reward, as I always say. When you're trading this, very important to not have a terrible risk reward, or even worse than that, just buy something and just not put a stop loss and just hold it and hope that sentiment improves in your favor. Not a good idea. And again, always check sentiment readings early. This is not something that you're just going to read one day on a few different sites and just say, hey, this altcoin looks like a really good buy or Bitcoin looks like a really good sell. You need to be checking the change in sentiment and the change in price relative to sentiment as well. So that's going to be it for at least a half-hour video. If you've made it this far, hopefully you are now a social sentiment expert and are ready to write a 250-page paper on market psychology and behavioral finance. And you can cite me. But no, this data can be very helpful for when trading cryptocurrencies, but of course, do your own practice, do your own research, look at the data yourself. You can use the strategies that I have, of course, but try to look at the data yourself and try to make your own opinion of it, because that may be the best way to go. And with that, happy trading.